Favor,
Okay, the mayor, last speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There are, as people know, two items that are being heard together here, and I'll just deal very briefly with the item coming from Planning and Growth. This item is integral to significant development on the Unilever site and the development of transit, which will benefit people across Toronto, and it's part of a more significant transit project, and it's important to that project proceeding as well. It's kind of a two-way street here where we have the development and the transit and the transit and the development, and so I just hope members of Council will support that item. With respect to the other item coming from economic development, I want to say this. First of all, there is no question, and we have the material in front of us from our staff, and obviously we know the recommendation that they've made here, and we know the motion that Councillor Thompson has put forward. But in the report that was dated January of 2018, addressed to the Executive Committee from the Deputy City Managers and the Acting Chief Financial Officer, they did indicate, and a number of members of Council, Madam Speaker, have spoken to these facts, but I think they're worthy of repetition. A total of 31 projects have been approved. The developments are expected to provide 1.1 million square meters of new employment space, 1 million square meters, not square feet, square meters of new employment, support 47,000 new or retained jobs, that they will yield $889 million in new incremental taxes over the 10 to 12-year payment period, as opposed to, by the way, the 100-year life cycle that somebody just mentioned, Councillor Shiner, of these buildings. And so forth and so on. And it goes on to then talk about what the city will end up getting net and what the city will get, I guess, gross once the benefits of the program have been fully received by these people who will be substantial taxpayers. Now, that is sort of a historical review and very brief summary of the program itself, but notwithstanding all those benefits and all those numbers and all the benefits historically and the root causes of why the program came into being, which was, and we forget how soon it comes. I mean, these periods of time when we're scrambling around trying to get anybody to build anything right now because we have the luxury of being in a period where more people are building more things. Sometimes one might argue too many in some places, but we forget that. But having said all that, I became a supporter soon after I came here about the need to rationalize and I'll call it reform this program to make it much more selective. And of course, we're in the process of doing exactly that. And I believe that is the right thing to do. But you have people here, and this is the reason why I will support Councillor Thompson's motion, because there are people here who submitted applications in good faith, and I'm not saying anybody here acted in bad faith, but there are people here who submitted applications in good faith, and in some cases I believe I'm correct in saying that 18 months passed by, and in fact during that period of time they started the construction, and there was no phone call received saying, oh, by the way, that application you have in here, that's not really going to be valid anymore, or that the new rules, or the way we're applying this, or the way we're doing this. And they might have reason. People have asked the question, I've heard during the course of questions and discussions, to believe that it's possible one could be turned down. And I've checked, and I believe I'm correct in saying that at this level, at City Council, there has never been one of those applications turned down, ever. And so I think that what you have to look at here is, not some of the inflammatory things that have been said with respect to, what we're denying other people by doing this and so on. You have to look at what is fair and what is right. And I am strongly supportive of changing the rules on this program. I'm supportive of the direction in which the staff have recommended we go, which is to confine the application of the program to certain parts of the city where we're not getting any development, quite frankly. But I think in this case we are dealing with people who put in applications, had them sitting here for some considerable period of time, not 2 weeks, not 2.5 days, but in some cases 18 months, and that fairness says we apply the same approach to them that we have approached in the past, and that we be consistent in the way we're going about this, especially when some of them have got to the stage literally over that period of time when the application was in, where nobody called as they put shovels in the ground and started to spend substantial sums of money and said, oh, by the way, you should understand you're not going to get the money, or it's highly unlikely, or we'll recommend against it. And so that is the reason why I will vote for this, being a supporter, a strong supporter. I even came to the initial sort of discussion on this as a new mayor and as somebody who looked at this and said, why don't we just do away with the entire program? And I was convinced that if you want to stimulate, because I've gone to developers and said to them, why don't you build any office space anytime in Scarborough and North York? Because I genuinely wanted to see that happen, not just so they'd build in Scarborough and North York, but so that people would be able to stay closer to home and work and not have to jam the roads up or the transit system coming down here. We got back, I think, a sensible alternative to that, which was to pick areas where we thought it was necessary to have those incentives, which probably accomplishes what I want. But I think the time to do that and the way to do that is to do it fairly, with consistency and with proper notice, and not to change the rules, what I believe to be partway through the game. So that's the reason why I'll be supporting Councillor Thompson's motion. I'll support a couple of parts of Councillor Perks' motion, the parts that were mentioned, and not others. And I will, of course, support the Unilever, so-called Unilever item coming from Planning and Growth. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Questions to Mr. Mayor? Councillor Davis.
Just want to ask, what's the rule that was changed halfway through the game?
Well, it's an expression, but what I'm talking about here is that if people had reason to believe, based on past practice, that City Council,
what was
I'm informed. No, please, again, I'll just answer, and I'll try to be, that in the past, that when people generally went away from this process, it was when they came to the application process and when they went through the discussions with our own staff, they generally would kind of not bother to submit an application, or would even withdraw some that were in. But if I look at the history of this, there has never been an application that has come to the City Council that has been turned down.
Mr.
And so
Mayor?
I am saying in this case where people put in their application, got all the way to the stage in some cases after 18 months. So that's partway into the game, and I don't want to refer to it as a game. It's an expression perhaps I shouldn't have used, because we're not talking about a game, but it is partway through the process, 18 months in this case, when they've been making their decisions and getting their financing and starting to actually build their building, that is not the time when they suddenly should be confronted with the fact that we have taken a different approach, or we're taking a given approach. I think we had some obligation to say to them
So, Mr.
sooner
Mayor,
than
Councillor Davis, please
All
allow
right, no,
the
it's fine.
mayor
I've
to
taken long
finish.
enough to answer, so fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So you would agree, though, that no rules were changed? There were no changes to the policy? Maybe just yes or no, there were no changes to the
Please,
policy?
I don't need to have you tell me. We're not in court here where you get to tell me yes or no answers.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you, I just want a short answer. Sometimes you do speak too long.
Councillor Davis, please.
Just like you, Councillor Davis.
After all those remarks of this morning.
Yes.
So, leaving that aside, I will just say to you that we're in the process of changing the rules, but the bottom line would be this. I just think it is sound practice. Let's put it that way. Let's get away from changing the rules or changing process or having people get partway through a process and not understand what's going on. I think it would have been incumbent upon the city, if we were saying to people who had no reason to believe, based on past history, that they would receive this money or have an excellent chance, based on the council never having turned one down before, it would have been incumbent upon us, whether it's at the staff or the political level, to call those people and say, you know what, in this case, for whatever reason, you're not going to get that grant. And that would have been, even if you said that wasn't necessary, it wasn't required, it would have been an appropriate thing to do, so that they're not in any way reliant upon the fact that they had an expectation to get it.
So, Mr. Mayor, you would agree, though, that there has never been one come before us with a recommendation that said not to grant it. So, in terms of past practice, everyone has always known, including these applicants, that anything over 150 million comes before council, and that there is a decision made of council. And you would agree that all of the ones that have been approved in the past have come with a positive staff recommendation.
I didn't ask that question, but I'm quite prepared to take your word for it.
I'm asking you, would you not agree that everyone that has come before us has come with a staff recommendation?
I just said I don't know that answer is correct, but I'm prepared to take your word for it. If you say that's true, I didn't ask anybody to verify that that's true. I just know that no application's ever been turned down by council. I take yes for an answer, Councillor, respectfully.
Well,
I'm saying yes. If you
that's
say
good,
so, I'll
because
accept your word.
It is true.
Right.
That's why this is different. And I guess I really want to understand why, when council has so many pressing issues, why would we give $364 million to the largest corporations in this country.
You know, I will say this in response to that question. The fact these are the largest corporations in Canada, I think, is such a red herring. The fact of the matter is they're also the people who create thousands upon thousands of jobs that your constituents hold down.
Yes,
they make investments in this city that your constituents benefit from. They pay tax revenues to this city. I think Cadillac Fairview, one of the companies, is the single biggest taxpayer in this city. And I think the notion that you put these people down, as have other councillors, I think is disgraceful. These are people that are making the economy go. Government doesn't create wealth. Those people do. They create jobs, they pay taxes, and they finance every activity that we undertake in this chamber.
Yes,
and I think the notion that you and other people in here put those people down, you should be ashamed of yourself. Ashamed of yourself.
I'm ashamed that we're
You'll have time to think about that when the election's over.
Okay, thank you, thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Perks.
Thank you. To you, Mr. Mayor. So you heard when Mr. Williams said that every single one of the applicants here was told from the beginning that there would be a requirement that council approve that. You heard that?
Yes, indeed I did, and I also understand that they would think of that council approval as something that is fairly routine in that, and that's why I'm saying I think we at the staff level or the political level or both had an obligation to call them, because if they checked the record they would see that the record of council approval was 100% in favour of these applications, not 96, not 43, 100%.
Thank you. You also listened when Mr. Williams said that the program has always been based on a but-for examination. The city evaluates their application to see that but for the tax grant, they wouldn't build. You heard him explain that that's always been the case.
And yes, and I understand the
Good,
point. Just let me answer now, you've asked.
Yeah.
I understand the point, and I would say to you that if we were sort of saying, well, look, this is that time when the but-for examination has produced a result for you, the notion that it took us 18 months to the point where at least one, I think more of these projects would be under construction, with people spending money on an assumption they made, and you can question that, but an assumption they made that since the approval rate in the past had been 100% at council, that they'd factored that into to the point where I think we had some documentation in front of us where the LCBO and Menkes in one case made a deal and they set their rents based on the assumption, based on 100% council approval, that this money would be forthcoming. And so I think, isn't it interesting that there was no phone call made, notwithstanding what you were saying was true, that said, well, you know, by the way, the but-for examination's happening, or it has happened, or will happen, and you shouldn't, you know, you should be clearly understanding that what you saw as a 100% approval rating in the past might be different this time. And I think that was not the best of process followed by us in that case.
I have two more questions, just two. The first, the premise is that they heard nothing in the 18 months. You're aware that within the 18 months, and that's only one of the projects, others were much shorter windows, that council had a report in front of it suggesting that we no longer give grants in the areas where two of these people applied. So they would have noticed that. They would have noticed there was something of an amber light starting to appear on the horizon. You're aware of that as well?
Yes, of course I am. Because
Okay, if I could get my final question, sir, please. My final question.
Please, Mr. Councillor Perks.
Okay.
Please. I mean, again, to be fair.
Councillor Perks, allow the mayor.
You only have 3 minutes because, okay, well then.
No, actually, it's 5
So my
minutes.
final question
I
is,
was fine, no,
you
but
sat
let
on
me
a
answer
number
the
of
last
boards
one
of
then, before you
directors.
take to answer the next one. I've now even
You sat on
forgotten
a
what it
number of
was.
boards of directors.
But-
Would you
the
ever,
Amber Light.
would you ever go and spend money without a signed contract
Councillor
from the
Perks.
government based on that money coming? Would
Councillor
you ever
Amber Light.
direct your staff to go spend money without a signed contract?
The amber light goes both ways, Madam Speaker, through you to the councillor, which is that I think that, and this is what I've said here, that I think that we had some obligation, which as far as I know we did not carry out, to say to these people, you know, you might take a look at this report. I know they follow these things, but you might take a look at this report. You might also understand there is some other process underway that is going to call into question this application you put in a year and a half ago or a year ago, whatever they all were, and that, you know, we should, and I think the discussion might have even been more explicit than that. It should have been. And I'm just saying that. But having said all that, that is the, yes, I stand by that point, because I think that notwithstanding whatever I would have done as an executive, I think that we have the obligation as the people who are receiving and processing these applications and deciding or not deciding to give the money to make sure we are fair and equitable and consistent in the way we communicate with people about what our plans and intentions are. And in this case, 100% of applications coming before City Council were approved in the past.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the motion is on the screen.
Councillor Perruzza, please. Councillor Davis, please.
The motion does not carry. The vote is 20-20 for each side. It loses on a tie.